have a timeout. Decide not to use it. Curry, way downtown. Bang! Bang! Oh, what a shot from Curry! With 0.6 of a second remaining.
The 5 NBA teams with the best title odds going into the 2025-2026 season include 2 recent finals champions in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's Oklahoma City Thunder and Nikola Jokic's Denver Nuggets. It also includes 2 immensely talented Eastern Conference rosters flooded with playoff experience in Jalen Brunson's New York Knicks and Donovan Mitchell's Cleveland Cavaliers. Finally, rounding out the top 5, there is a new champion contender who has emerged, the Houston Rockets. Not so long ago, the concept of the Rockets appearing in a top 5 finals odds graphic would have seemed like an AI edit. From 2021 to 2023, the team won a grand total of 59 games across 3 seasons. They had no stars, a litany of aging, past prime veterans, and little hope to speak of. But now, the team is as good a place as any in the league, boasting a deep roster flushed with young, gritty, talented stars led by a true defensive mastermind. In this video, we will discuss how over the course of 5 seasons, the Houston Rockets were able to rebuild from league laughingstock to championship contender with a little help from The Decision, The Seventh Commandment, Mark Tatum, and the Boogeyman of Houston, Texas. Welcome to Case Study, 2020's Houston Rockets edition.
Yeah, just to see how the other half lives. Move over. I'm emailing the firm I just found our...
Were these magic grits? I mean, did you buy them from the same guy who sold Jack his beanstalk beans?
You want answers!
I want the truth! You can't handle the truth!
Before we dive into the rebuild, we first need to go over why a rebuild was necessary. To do that, we have to go back to 2012, when the Houston Rockets first acquired shooting guard James Harden from the Oklahoma City Thunder. Harden, better known by his nickname, the Beard, quickly evolved from a highly efficient 6 Man of the Year winner in Oklahoma City to one of the greatest scoring guards of all time during his tenure in Houston. With his razor-quick first step, patented step back, and savvy ability to get to the free throw line consistently, the Beard was an all-star 8 times over with the Rockets, adding 3 scoring titles and 1 MVP award in 2018. In 8 seasons in Houston, the Rockets won an average of 52 games per season with Harden leading the charge, supplemented by big-name co-stars like Dwight Howard in the early years and Chris Paul during the peak years from 2017 to 2019. The 2010s era Rockets under Harden were what Bill Simmons might call a critically acclaimed basketball team, that being one that provided its city with a litany of memorable moments and drew millions of eyeballs nationally due to their successful brand of basketball.
And that might be the single greatest crossover in the history of the NBA.
But, regrettably, this era was ultimately defined by increasingly torturous heartbreak. Heartbreak that can best be described by the following short film.
He got the shot off! Throw it down! Good! And the Blazers win the series!
He's at him. He's got shot. What a play by Ginobili! Knocked it away.
Because you know he's not going to come off the court. But he is hurt right now, limping, walking gingerly and slowly to the sideline. Again, look at the play on the other half.
Not only were Harden's Rockets unable to claim the 3rd Larry O'Brien trophy in franchise history, they were ultimately unable to escape the Western Conference playoff entirely, falling to Steph Curry's Golden State Warriors a whopping 4 times in 8 seasons. Following their 4th loss at the hands of the Warriors in the spring of 2019, a falling out between Harden and co-star Chris Paul led to a Paul for Russell Westbrook swap that, as it turned out, left the team even further away from its ultimate goal of winning the NBA Finals. Following an up-and-down season with Harden and Westbrook running the show during the COVID-shortened 2019-2020 season, the wheels of impending rebuild were officially set in motion on September 12, 2020, when the Rockets were defeated in 5 games by the Los Angeles Lakers in the Western Conference semifinals. On the surface, it was an honorable loss to the eventual bubble champions, but underneath, the loss represented the last gasp of a core that had been trending down for the last 2 seasons. The day after the Rockets' bubble elimination, legendary head coach Mike D'Antoni announced that he would not be returning to the club. 2 years earlier, D'Antoni, mastermind of the 7 seconds or less offense in Phoenix, had led the Rockets to 1 game and 1 0 for 27 shooting stretch away from the NBA Finals. Now, he was gone. 1 month after D'Antoni's departure, longtime general manager Daryl Morey announced that he too would be stepping down from his role, ending a 13-year run as architect of the Houston Rockets. It was Morey in the first place who had weighted the team through the sharp decline of the Tracy McGrady and Yao Ming Rockets era earlier in the century, and it was he who had made the move to acquire the Beard in the first place back in 2012. But in the span of 4 weeks, the franchise had lost both its top on-court tactician and its renowned roster builder. In November of 2020, reports started to slowly trickle out that James Harden, beating heart and soul of the Rockets, no longer felt that he could legitimately contend for titles playing in Houston, and instead was eyeing the budding dynasty that was being built in Brooklyn, where the Nets were about to begin their first full season with recent free agent acquisitions Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. Harden made his trade demand to the Rockets brass that offseason. However, while the Beard was crystal clear in his wishes of where to go, the Rockets organization was under no obligation to fulfill the trade request. This is where the player empowerment era of the NBA reared its ugly head on the city of Houston. You see, the player empowerment era is how basketball fans describe the era of the NBA in the immediate aftermath of LeBron James's infamous decision, when he changed the way that players would leverage their free agency opportunities by bolting from his hometown Cleveland Cavaliers to join Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh on the Miami Heat.
In this fall, I'm going to take my talents to South Beach and join the Miami Heat.
Miami Heat. That was the conclusion you woke up with this morning.
That was the conclusion I woke up with this morning.
Following James's decision, other NBA franchises quickly began frothing at the mouth at the idea of creating their very own super teams to compete with Miami's new Big Three, with some working out incredibly successfully and others not so much. This also led to a world where NBA All-Stars were now hopping from team to team with unprecedented frequency by whatever means necessary in order to maximize their perceived winning potential. And when I say whatever means necessary, I mean whatever means necessary. That included signing short-term extensions in order to reach free agency sooner, turning team scrimmages into incredibly hostile environments, and even brazen trade demands made directly to the public. So when James Harden found himself frustrated in the middle of the player empowerment era by the Rocket organization's unwillingness to acquiesce to his trade demands in a timely fashion, he took matters into his own hands, by whatever means necessary. This was done by making his partying off the court increasingly public, showing up to training camp visibly out of shape, and causing chaos inside the locker room. Never mind that the franchise had spent the better part of a decade bending to Harden's will, from the Dwight Howard acquisition in 2013 to the Chris Paul trade in 2017, down to the incredibly short-sighted Russell Westbrook trade in 2019. The Beard wanted out, and nothing was going to stop him from achieving that goal. In doing so, Harden torched the bridges between both team owner Tillman Fertitta and the loyal fan base in Houston that had spent the better part of a decade defending all of the Beard's playoff shortcomings. For the city of Houston, it was the biggest public betrayal in the sports world endured by the fans since Carlos Beltran abandoned the Astros in 2005 to sign with the New York Mets. After months of backstabbing, sabotage, and public declarations of discontent to the media, on January 13, 2021, the move was made official. James Harden was headed to the Brooklyn Nets in exchange for a package of underwhelming on-court assets including Victor Oladipo and Dante Exum. With that, the critically acclaimed era of the Harden Rockets was over, with no rings to show for it. With limited options and a sudden dearth of high-end talent, the Rockets were left with one option on their immediate horizon: embrace the tank. As Harden's plane headed for LaGuardia, with him went the last hope of the Rockets' chances of playing competitive basketball for the foreseeable future. Under Mike D'Antoni's stewardship, the Rockets had won a league-high 65 games in 2018, but the team had regressed to 53 wins in 2019 and 44 wins in the COVID-shortened 2020 season. Aging, financial limitations, and chemistry issues all contributed to the team's regression, and once Harden was gone, the wheels had completely fallen off the wagon. This led the franchise to pursue a popular sports strategy known as tanking, which is a strategy of purposeful losing in order to acquire higher and more valuable picks during the amateur drafts in the offseason. In fact, the concept of tanking first drew public ire nationally when the 1983 Rockets threw ethics out the door, finishing with an appalling 14-68 record in a successful effort to tank for Houston Cougar legend Hakeem Olajuwon. Space City got to keep its homegrown legend, but the NBA responded to the tanking craze of the 1980s by instituting a lottery system that determines the draft order, replacing the old system of awarding the top picks directly to the teams with the worst records. The lottery format has evolved over the years from a true 1 in 14 chance to a more convoluted and theoretically fair set of odds. But, ultimately, the lottery system remains in place to this day for deciding the draft order. The concept of lottery odds luck would become a key component in the Rocket organization's livelihood in the immediate aftermath of the Harden trade. The man who replaced Mike D'Antoni in the offseason was Stephen Silas, a rookie head coach who had spent the prior 2 seasons as a top assistant to Rick Carlisle on the Dallas Mavericks. 2 months earlier, the Rockets' head coaching job might have seemed like a pretty enticing gig, but as the calendar flipped to 2021, it became apparent that Silas was being thrust into the Brett Brown role of tank commander. And for the rest of the 2021 season, Silas performed his role masterfully. I like to think that George Patton himself would have been proud of some of those late 2021 Rockets lineups that included guys like post-surgeries John Wall and Boogie Cousins, 40-minute performances from Christian Wood and KJ Martin, and a healthy sprinkling of Kevin Porter Jr. iso ball. At season's end, the Rockets were the not-so-proud owners of a 17-55 record, the lowest win total that the franchise had posted since the infamous 1983 season. The bad news was that 0 of the team's young assets had proved that they were going to be a part of the team's long-term future going forward, but the good news was that the team would have a 14% chance at landing the number 1 overall pick in the lottery, and a 52% chance of landing at least inside the top 4. In 2021, there was a clear-cut first overall selection for whichever team would be lucky enough to win the lottery, that being Oklahoma State's Cade Cunningham, a high-flying and high-IQ point guard. On the night of the lottery drawing, the Rockets were fortunate enough to get down to the last 2 picks without seeing their logo pulled. But then, with the possibility of replacing Harden with Cunningham within reach, Rockets faithful got their first taste of the bitter pain that comes along with witnessing NBA Deputy Commissioner Mark Tatum pull their team's logo a minute too early. The opportunity to select Cunningham was regrettably now out of reach. But, armed with the 2nd, 23rd, and 24th overall picks in the first round, the team was still primed to add a great influx of young talent. A pair of seldom-seen prospects quickly separated themselves from the rest in the eyes of Rockets' new general manager, a man named Raphael Stone. Stone, an internal hire after the Daryl Morey 2020 departure, was determined to leave the 2021 player draft with 2 players, Jalen Green, a shooting guard whose high-flying acrobatics were well documented across his lone season playing for the NBA G League Ignite, and Alperen Şengün, a 19-year-old center who had just been named MVP of the 2020-2021 Turkish Basketball Super League. Green was quickly made the 2nd overall pick in the draft after Cunningham was selected first by the Detroit Pistons, representing the first selection of Stone's rebuild. However, as Şengün's name had arisen up the draft boards in the weeks leading up to the draft, suddenly it was not becoming so likely that he would slip to the Rockets' next pick at 23. So, Stone executed a trade with the Oklahoma City Thunder that would become one of the 2 most consequential Thunder Rockets moves of all time. Houston sent a pair of future first-round picks, one coming from the Washington Wizards via the Russell Westbrook trade, to Oklahoma City in exchange for the 16th overall pick and the rights to select Alperen Şengün.
We picked Jalen, and then I don't know. I think starting at like pick 6, I started throwing stuff. We were very much trying to come out of that draft with those 2 guys, and I started throwing stuff at teams, trying to trade up all the way. Yeah, like immediately after we made our first pick, we were trying to get him.
Because nobody watched the G League, a feeder league to the NBA that acted as a minor league option for players who sought financial compensation directly out of high school before the days of NIL. And because Şengün had made a name for himself overseas, few fans could have guessed how much potential they really had based on anything other than YouTube mixes. As opposed to familiar guys like Oklahoma State's Cade Cunningham, USC's Evan Mobley, and Gonzaga's Jalen Suggs, all of whom played in the NCAA's March Madness tournament that year, Rockets fans would have to get used to prospects that only Raphael Stone's scout team and the truly obsessive fans could have a real gauge on. Averse to the quick-fix team-building strategies that often led to short, unsustainable runs of success, Stone and his staff believed that the only way to complete a truly successful rebuild was to stick it out, take the early losses, and provide the prospects he believed in with the time and care necessary to build them up over a period of multiple years into the best versions of themselves on the basketball court.
For me, success is not about the wins and losses. It's about helping these young fellas be the best versions of themselves on and off the field.
For this reason, few additions were made to the team's roster in the offseason outside of the high-profile draft day pickups. As a result, unless that pair of teenagers that Stone believed in turned out to be the second comings of Michael Jordan and Shaquille O'Neal, the Rockets were looking down the barrel at another season of basement dwelling in the Western Conference. And basement dwelling they did. The roster's best player that season was probably Christian Wood, who had signed a 3-year, $41 million contract with the team in 2020. But that deal proved to be more of a "we need some human being to fill out the roster" type of contract than a "we believe in you as part of this team's future" contract. The same could be said for contracts given to journeymen like DJ Augustine, Dennis Schroeder, and Garrison Matthews, all of whom played and started for the 2021-2022 Rockets. In the end, the Rockets were, for the second consecutive season, 30th of 30 teams in the NBA in wins, finishing with a 20-62 record. While the dog days were still fully in swing, the Rockets did have two major wins during the 2021-2022 season. The first win was that both Green and Şengün had proved amidst the team's overall lackluster performance that they were productive prospects worthy of long-term investment. Green's 17-point, 3-rebound, and 3-assist per game averages were even enough to net him a top 5 finish in the NBA's Rookie of the Year voting. Şengün, who mostly came off the bench as a rookie, had averaged 10 points and 6 rebounds per game while giving the city glimpses of his potential as one of the great footwork artists and posterizers in the league. The other major win for the Rockets organization during this otherwise sputtering campaign came as a massive stroke of luck from the player empowerment era that had laid waste to the city 2 years prior. You see, less than 1 year after coming within literal inches of advancing to the Eastern Conference Finals, the Big Three Brooklyn Nets had all but entirely fallen apart. As it turned out, the grass in the Bed-Stuy was no greener than it had been in Houston for James Harden. Frustrated with co-star Kyrie Irving's lack of availability, Harden started soft-launching his trade request in the weeks leading up to the 2022 trade deadline. On February 10, 2022, the Nets organization moved former Rocket James Harden to the Philadelphia 76ers in exchange for a hilarious package in retrospect centered around alleged professional basketball player Ben Simmons. That trade was executed after Harden privately made his second trade request in 13 months to Brooklyn management. In Philly, he was reunited with former Rockets GM Daryl Morey, where the pair would live happily ever after and compete for years to come. Just kidding.
Daryl Morey is a liar, and I will never be a part of an organization that he's a part of again. Thank you, man.
When it was all said and done, the critically acclaimed trio of Kevin Durant, James Harden, and Kyrie Irving only suited up together a grand total of 16 games across 2 seasons. The Nets' collapse provided a satisfying dose of schadenfreude for Houstonians, but more importantly, it served as a legitimate aid in Rafael Stone's rebuilding plan, because now, without 2/3 of their Big Three, the Nets' draft picks that had been sent to the Rockets in 2020 as compensation for the Harden trade had skyrocketed in value. Instead of those picks landing in the 25 to 30 range, where the league's contenders typically draft, those mostly unprotected first-round picks were looking more and more lottery-bound with each passing day. Speaking of the lottery, the Rockets again waltzed into the drawing on May 17, 2022, with the best odds of landing the number 1 overall pick, which that season was considered a toss-up between Duke's scoring phenom Paolo Banchero and Gonzaga's two-way 7-footer Chet Holmgren. Again, the Rockets made it into the top 4, and again, they watched in horror as their logo was pulled too early. This time, the Rockets were stuck with the number 3 overall pick in the upcoming player draft. Another gut punch for the fans on lottery night. But also armed with the number 17 overall pick from the Brooklyn Nets, the Rockets left the draft with a pair of recognizable SEC stars in Auburn's Jabari Smith Jr., the 3rd overall pick, and LSU's Tari Eason, the 17th overall pick. Both players were welcome additions to the youthful squads Stone was putting together during his rebuild. But just like Green and Şengün, the incoming rookies would receive little support from veteran teammates in the upcoming season, as the Rockets mostly sat out free agency for the second season in a row in order to give their young talent as much time as possible to gel together on the court. There was a twinge more hope surrounding the team heading into the 2022-2023 season. Even though their preseason title odds were still a cool plus 50,000, they had weathered the growing pains of Green and Şengün's rookie campaigns, and there was expectation internally that the team would show at least some clear signs of improvement. But instead, what the city got was a carbon copy of the season prior. There were a lot of minutes going around to kids who were not old enough to legally drink alcohol yet in the United States, and the team's veteran entity was mostly ineffective cast-offs. For the second season in a row, The only things that the franchise had to show for its 82-game slog was the continued development of its younger assets, specifically Alperen Şengün, who was improving to a 15-point and 9-rebound per game scorer, and the continued downfall of the Brooklyn Nets. Following a year-long saga of poor injury luck, anti-vaccination league violations, and a suspension following claims of anti-Semitic behavior, All-Star guard and Brooklyn native Kyrie Irving demanded a trade the first week of February. Later that same week, his wish was granted by the organization, and he was shipped to the Dallas Mavericks.
Also for Brooklyn, they were ready to be done with this Kyrie Irving situation. They got back what they hoped they would.
That downfall was made complete on February 9th, 2023, when Kevin Durant was traded to the Phoenix Suns, bringing a merciful end to a 7-month trade demand saga. In exchange for Durant, Brooklyn received a package centered around floor-spacing forwards Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson, in addition to a treasure trove of first-round draft compensation. With Durant off the roster for the Nets, their expectations fell off a cliff. At the beginning of the 2022-2023 season, their over-under for total wins was 50.5. The next season, without Durant, their over-under dropped to 37.5. And spoiler alert, they would not be hitting that over. With the Nets in freefall, the Brooklyn Nets draft picks acquired by Houston in the James Harden trade were starting to look an awful lot like Forrest Gump's investment in some kind of fruit company back in the 80s. After hoping that those picks would land at best in the top 20 in the trade's immediate aftermath, with Durant out of the picture, those picks now looked like potential top 10 selections on a consistent basis. But regrettably, this stroke of good luck off the court did not translate quickly to wins on the court. The team's offense actually went backwards in 2023, going from 19th in the league in points per game in 2022 to 28th in the league in 2023. And even though Şengün was showing signs of quick growth and Green had turned into a more than 20 points per game scorer, their most recent lottery selection, Jabari Smith Jr., had been struggling greatly as a rookie. He averaged 12 points and 7 rebounds per game, but did so on a woeful 41% shooting percentage from inside the arc and a 31% shooting percentage from outside the arc. Dumping former Sixth Man of the Year Eric Gordon, the last remaining link to the glory days of the Harden era, at the trade deadline in 2023, only soured the vibes of the pitiful season even further. They finished with a 22-60 overall record, tied for the second worst record in basketball that season. That record also represented the Rockets' first 3-season stretch of consecutive losing seasons since 1972 to 1974, when the team was being led on the court by Rudy Tomjanovich. With too few steps in the right direction to be seen for Houston, the team fired head coach Stephen Silas on April 9, 2023. His final tally across 3 seasons at the helm in Houston, 59 wins and 177 losses, making his tenure synonymous, fair or unfair, with the worst stretch of basketball in Rockets history. A large part of why Silas was let go at the time he was because the franchise was ultimately unconfident that he would be able to maximize the prize of the 2023 lottery if the Rockets were able to finally win. That prize being the 7'5" generational prospect out of France, Victor Wembanyama. Almost all NBA drafts have a signature prospect that is projected to go first overall for most of the year leading up to it, but Wembanyama was seen as a far more special prospect than that. For years leading up to the 2023 lottery, the basketball world had been hearing about the French teenager lighting up the EuroLeague and LNB Pro A with his freakish size, shot-making ability, and defensive versatility. His truly unique tangibles turned him into the kind of can't-miss prospect that garnered comparisons as a teenager to LeBron James in 2003, Hakeem Olajuwon in 1984, and Lou Alcindor, later known as Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, in 1969. Every team in the league coveted Wembanyama's talents, but only the 14 teams in the lottery had a real chance to draft him, with the Houston Rockets being one of those teams. Having missed out on the number 1 overall pick in both of the last 2 lottery drawings, there was a lot of optimism in and around the city of Houston that this would finally be the year that they would break through and win it all. Dreams of adding Wemby to the legacy of Hall of Fame number 1 overall Rockets centers had filled the heads of the fan base for months. First there was Ralph Sampson in 1983, then Hakeem Olajuwon in 1984, then Yao Ming in 2002, and now Wembanyama in 2023 could be the next big to grace Space City with Hall of Fame post moves and shot blocking ability. The lottery to decide Wembanyama's future was May 16, 2023. With tension at an all-time high in the drawing room, the Rockets for the 3rd year in a row lasted into the top 4 without seeing their logo pulled. But when Mark Tatum was back from a commercial break, he sank the hearts of Rocket players, fans, and management when he flipped up the Rockets logo as the 4th pick in the upcoming draft. After falling lower and lower and lower in the lottery drawings for 3 consecutive seasons now, Mark Tatum's mid-drawing smile was starting to feel a lot less jovial for Rockets fans and a lot more maniacal. Kind of like Norman Bates at the end of Psycho.
They'll know, and they'll say, why, she wouldn't even harm a fly.
Not only was Wembanyama out of play, so was Scoot Henderson out of G League Ignite, and Brandon Miller from Alabama. And to add insult to injury, the team that won Wembanyama's services was Houston's in-state rival San Antonio Spurs, who got to add him to a different legacy of Hall of Fame number 1 overall centers. Losing the Victor Wembanyama lottery and falling to 4th in the draft, in the immediate aftermath of a 59-win 3-season stretch, represented rock bottom for the Houston Rockets organization. But the good news was, from rock bottom, the only place to go from there was up. The first sign that the Rockets were trending up was when they made their replacement pick for head coach after Stephen Silas's firing. Internally, the end of the Silas tenure was to mark the end of Phase 1 of the rebuilding process. Now, they were searching for a leader to oversee Phase 2, where the team would take legitimate strides in the right direction as they closed in on the ever-elusive Phase 3, where they could again compete for championships. This is where the whole "you shall not commit adultery" commandment wound up coming in really clutch for the Rockets organization. On April 24th, 2023, word broke that free agent coach Ime Udoka was coming in to take over as head coach of the Houston Rockets. 10 months earlier, Udoka was manning the sidelines for the Boston Celtics in the NBA Finals, where they finished 2 games and 1 generational finals run from Steph Curry away from winning the whole thing. In Udoka's first and only season as head coach in Boston, the Celtics took massive strides on both sides of the ball, but particularly on defense. After finishing 14th in the league in defensive rating in 2021 with Brad Stevens as head coach, the Celtics finished 2nd in the NBA in defensive rating in 2022 with Udoka as head coach. Before Udoka's lone season at the helm in Boston, the Celtics had not won the Eastern Conference since 2010, when they were still being led by Kevin Garnett, Paul Pierce, and Ray Allen. But the honeymoon stage between Udoka and the Celtics franchise would not last long. On September 22, 2022, Udoka was suspended for the entirety of the 2022-2023 season for, quote, using crude language in dialogue with a female subordinate prior to the start of an improper relationship. As it turns out, Udoka and a married woman on the Celtics staff had carried out an illicit affair behind the backs of one another's respective families. Following the suspension, Udoka's top assistant from the year prior, Joe Mazzulla, took over as interim head coach. On February 16, 2023, after Mazzulla led the C's to a 42-17 start, he was officially named the 19th head coach in Celtics history, marking the end of Udoka's tenure with the team. This is how Udoka found himself in the job market during the 2023 offseason. The Rockets set a wide initial search for Silas's replacement, a search that included candidates like Kenny Atkinson, Frank Vogel, and James Borrego. Raphael Stone was quoted saying, "We want someone who has a real vision of how to implement our young guys and incorporate veterans, a dynamic presence and vision. We want that voice to really resonate with our group." It did not take long for the organization to zero in on Udoka as the top candidate. After the hire was announced, Tillman Fertitta was quoted saying, "What we like about Udoka is his ability to coach a basketball team. He's going to hold these guys to toughness, respectability, accountability. It's everything how I like to run a business. Structure and everybody having the right guy they can communicate with. Hopefully soon, I won't be up here for anything except to tell you how great it was to win a championship. That's in Phase 3. You had to crawl, now we're going to walk, and then we're going to run." With Udoka coming in with full intentions of setting a defense-first culture in Houston, the Rockets organization quickly zeroed in on the absolute perfect prospect for Udoka with the 4th overall pick in the 2023 draft. That player was overtime elite's Amen Thompson. Like Jalen Green 2 years prior, was a seldom-seen prospect coming into the NBA because he had chosen to play in a developmental feeder league as opposed to Division I college basketball like most American prospects. However, his status as only the 4th overall pick was really just a byproduct of the insane quality of the 2023 NBA draft. Thompson, a 6'7" guard with a 6'11" wingspan, was one of the more special and unique defensive prospects to ever come out of the NBA draft. He was coming into the league already as a 99th percentile NBA athlete, with violent leaping ability, superior stop and start ability, and uncanny instincts, separating himself from the other prospects on the board in the eyes of the Rockets organization. They chose Amen Thompson over prospects like Kason Wallace from Michigan, Derek Lively II from Duke, and even Amen's twin brother Asar, also from Overtime Elite. With Udoka at the helm and Phase 1 in the rearview mirror, the team elected to take a different approach to free agency in the summer of 2023. Instead of handing out only light deals to journeymen just to fill out the roster and give the young guys a chance to see major minutes immediately, the team decided to seek out tough, defensive-minded veterans to start around the young talent and pass on their good habits to the rising stars in place. They were so intent on adding that specific profile of player that they were willing to pay a premium price for a free agent if they were convinced that they were the right fit. That search led them first to Toronto Raptors All-Star point guard Fred VanVleet. VanVleet, a former undrafted prospect out of Wichita State, had helped the Raptors secure their first ever NBA championship in 2019, and had gone on since to land 8th on the franchise's all-time scoring list, 3rd on their all-time assist list, and 4th on their all-time steals list. Moreover, he was seen as the perfect experienced table setter, someone with 52 playoff games on his resume and a strong defensive reputation, who could lead the offense as the team's first true point guard since Chris Paul's departure. On July 7, 2023, the Rockets made it official, inking VanVleet to a whopping 3-year, $130 million contract to take over as the team's starting point guard. 5 days later, the team added Memphis Grizzlies wing Dillon Brooks to its starting lineup as well on a 4-year, $80 million deal. Brooks, a second-team all-defensive player for the Grizzlies the year prior, came to the Rockets with a reputation as one of the most notoriously pesky players in the league, especially on defense. Coming to Houston with 22 career playoff games on his resume, he was and is the exact type of guy who is your least favorite player in the league if he's playing against you, but your absolute favorite player in the league if he's playing for your team. Think of him as a taller, better version of Patrick Beverley in that sense. The public reception of the VanVleet and Brooks signings was that the Rockets had probably overpaid for the two, but that did not matter to Houston. They had identified the experienced, defensive-minded quality starters that they needed in order to stabilize their young roster and take real steps towards sneaking back into the playoff picture. With VanVleet and Brooks in the starting lineup with Green, Şengün, and Smith Jr., the Rockets immediately took a step forward in the 2023-2024 season. Under Udoka, it took the Rockets just 46 games that season to match their entire win total from the season prior under Stephen Silas. More importantly than the win total, it was becoming clear that Alperen Şengün, Houston's former 16th overall selection back in 2021, was blossoming into one of the league's true rising stars. Young guys like Jabari Smith Jr. and Tari Eason, who spent much of that season on the injured list, were also starting to make strides, particularly on the defensive end of the court. On February 1st, 2024, the Rockets added another veteran when they acquired center Steven Adams from the Memphis Grizzlies in exchange for the recently reacquired Victor Oladipo and a trio of second-round draft picks. Adams, who was originally drafted in 2013 by the Thunder as part of the original draft package for the first James Harden trade, came to Houston as an established veteran rim protector with an impressive 66 playoff games on his resume. Adams was still recovering from PCL surgery in early 2024 and would not be able to suit up for the Rockets until the following season, but his acquisition was a bet by Stone and Udoka that buying low on someone of Adams' caliber could pay dividends in the near future. At season's end, the Rockets found themselves owners of a 41-41 record, one that unfortunately left them outside of the playoff picture, but one that represented a massive step in the right direction after 3 seasons of basement dwelling. Alperen Şengün finished his junior season in the NBA averaging 21 points, 9.3 rebounds, and 5 assists per game, all of which represented career highs for the Turkish center. As a rookie, Amen Thompson averaged 9.5 points, 7 rebounds, and 3 assists per game across an up-and-down season that included a brief stint in the G League, which acts as the NBA's pseudo-minor league system. As a team overall, the Rockets improved from the 29th defensive rating in the league in 2023 to 9th in the league in 2024 under Ime Udoka. The vibes in the Toyota Center were starting to shift, with each passing month of basketball being more fun and inspiring than the last in the Udoka era. Even though they had gone only 500 in 2024, Rockets fans found themselves right in the thick of the lottery drawing for the 4th year in a row. But this time, instead of their own pick they were worried about, they were watching for where their pick via the Brooklyn Nets would land. In 2024, the Nets organization, devoid of Durant, Harden, and Irving, watched as the wheels fell fully off the wagon, dropping to a 50-loss team. Brooklyn's first-round pick in 2024, which had the 9th best odds of winning the lottery, would convey to Houston unprotected as a result of the James Harden trade, also known in Houston at this point as the gift that keeps on giving. That pick wound up leaping from expected number 9 all the way to number 3. For the first time in the Raphael Stone era, the franchise had finally been on the plus side of lottery luck. The Rockets went ahead and used their number 3 overall pick on Kentucky point guard Reed Sheppard, who had shot up the draft boards after shooting an astonishing 52% from beyond the three-point line and averaged a conference-high 2.5 steals per game in his lone season in Lexington as a member of the Wildcats. Feeling confident in the team's depth and wanting to preserve the team's litany of young players' room to develop and separate themselves from one another, Stone left free agency alone for the most part in the summer of 2024, instead choosing to allocate funds to extensions for his first Rockets draft picks, Şengün and Green. On October 21, 2024, extensions for both were announced. Şengün signed a 5-year, $185 million contract, cementing himself as a key figure of the team and city's future. Green signed a 3-year, $106 million extension, highlighting that while he showed much promise, he still had something to prove to the brass and coaching staff before seeing anything near Şengün's financial commitment. Expectations were rising in Houston, as evidenced by Vegas shooting their preseason over-under win projections from 31.5 the year prior to 43.5 in 2024-2025. With team continuity rolling over thanks to little player movement in the offseason and another year of development under the belts of guys like Şengün, Amen Thompson, Tari Eason, and Jabari Smith Jr., the Rockets immediately proved to the league that they were different in 2024-2025. They immediately started stacking shockingly impressive wins to their resume in the season's first month, including wins over surefire contenders like Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving's Dallas Mavericks on the road, and Jalen Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns' New York Knicks at home. When the calendar flipped to 2025, the Rockets weren't just winning games, they were thriving, sitting as the 3rd seed in the entire Western Conference. The two players whose development was transferring into that success the most were Alperen Şengün and Amen Thompson. Şengün's scoring numbers were a slight tick down, but most others were up as he was cementing himself as one of the premier scoring and passing bigs in the league, the kind that require 4 to 6 eyes on them at all times when they're on the basketball court. His superior ability to turn advanced footwork into scoring opportunities for his offense had led to comparisons of him to proven playoff stars like 3-time league MVP Nikola Jokic and 2-time All-Star Jalen Brunson. With a seemingly endless array of advanced post moves that fooled even the NBA's best interior defenders, he had delighted Rockets fans to no end, reminding them of the good old days of the 1990s, when Hakeem Olajuwon was leading the team to glory with his famously intricate array of post moves and even more famous Dream Shake. Şengün being selected to the All-Star team on January 30th, 2025, felt like the moment where he had truly broken out as a star in the league and the face of the New Age Houston Rockets. Amen Thompson, on the other hand, was breaking out as the face of the Rockets' endlessly long, tough, and gritty defensive machine. On a roster chock full of talented defenders, Thompson separated himself as the alpha of the group, who would consistently take on the challenge of the opposing team's best player from tip-off to the final buzzer. He also represented 50% of the Rockets' duo dubbed the Terror Twins, with burgeoning defensive ace Tari Eason representing the other 50%. The two earned that nickname from the fan base by bringing hard, physical on-ball defense every night that can only be described as a terror to go up against. Thompson had also made an offensive leap from his rookie to sophomore season, showcasing a new array of herky-jerky moves that only work if you find yourself in the top 1% of athletic ability on Earth. Slicing and dicing to the basket for flashy posterizers, as well as crisp around-the-rim finishes, all the while picking up the opposing team's best player on the court at the other end for 48 minutes, Thompson quickly started to become one of the most popular and beloved athletes in the entire city of Houston. He has become precisely the kind of homegrown two-way star that makes Houstonians feel like they're rewatching the rises of J.J. Watt or Alex Bregman. And trust me, it's not too hyperbolic of me to equate Thompson's potential to that of 2 MVP runner-ups. This kid is that good. When someone identifies the ceiling of Thompson's defensive game, we'll try and let you know. The truth is, his instincts and athleticism make him one of the most impactful two-way players in this league already as a 22-year-old. If his offensive game, particularly his jump shot, can come along anywhere near as close to his defensive production, we could be looking at one of the truly great two-way developmental stories in league history. At season's end, Şengün had amassed a 19-point, 10-rebound, 5-assist, and 1.9 stocks per game stat line, with stocks representing an amalgamation of the steals and blocks defensive statistical categories. Thompson, on the other hand, had broken out with a 14-point, 8 rebound, 4 assist, and a whopping 2.7 stocks per game stat line. Thompson finished the season 5th in Defensive Player of the Year voting in 2025 and was named to the NBA's All-Defensive First Team. With Şengün and Thompson rounding into 2 of the best under-25 players in the league, Green and Smith Jr. adding productive minutes, and veterans like Van Vliet, Brooks, and a now-healthy Steven Adams supplementing the young core with its quality decision-making, defense, and rebounding, the Rockets climbed to a 52-30 record at the end of the 2025 regular season. It marked the first time for the franchise since the Harden era that the team had eclipsed 50 wins, and set them up comfortably as the number 2 seed in the Western Conference heading into the 2025 NBA playoffs. The Rockets that season finished 4th in the entire league in defensive rating, and also landed 13th in the league in offensive rating. Udoka's young squad had made massive strides from 2024, but they immediately found themselves face-to-face with an incredibly unlucky draw in the first round of the Western Conference playoffs, that being a matchup with the boogeyman of Houston, Texas. And no, I'm not talking about Albert Pujols.
In the air, left field, and Pujols has given St. Louis the lead. A dramatic, towering 3-run.
I'm talking about Stephen Curry. You might remember earlier that I mentioned that Curry and his Golden State Warriors had eliminated the James Harden Rockets 4 times between 2015 and 2019, nearly single-handedly preventing the Rockets from winning a championship during that era. Over those years, stretching through the time of the Rockets' rebuild, Curry had cemented a true basketball dynasty in the Bay, capturing 4 NBA championships and 2 MVP awards along the way. His history in Houston as a playoff villain has left him in truly rarefied status as maybe the single most hated figure in Houston sports history. Maybe even more hated than Mike Fiers. Considering the Warriors' aging core, with Curry now 37, Draymond Green now 35, and new Curry co-star Jimmy Butler at 36, the city was brimming with optimism heading into the series that 2025 would be the year that the Rockets finally sent Curry packing from the playoffs instead of the other way around. Such optimism quickly turned into anxiety as Curry dropped a game-high 31 points in a Game 1 masterclass at the Toyota Center in Houston, where the Warriors stole home court advantage for the series and jumped out to a 1-0 series lead.
Are you kidding me? Geometrically, that should not have happened. Wow, what a shot!
3 games later, the Rockets quickly found themselves down 3-1 in the best-of-7 series in a depressingly familiar spot, facing elimination in the playoffs at the hands of the Warriors.
Something very familiar about all this.
With Udoka's young Rockets' backs against the wall, they were able to muscle out 2 clutch wins in Games 5 and 6 to stave off elimination and force a Game 7 in Houston. The players that led the way for Houston in those 2 games more than any other were the trio of Van Vliet, Şengün, and Thompson. With a potential second-round matchup against Anthony Edwards' Minnesota Timberwolves looming, the Rockets and Warriors tipped off Game 7 on May 4th, 2025. The Rockets fought hard in that game, showcasing their defensive instincts and athleticism, but they ultimately relived Groundhog Day for the 5th time in franchise history, watching Curry ice them out in the 4th quarter of an elimination game. Buddy Hield's all-time heat check in Game 7 certainly did not help matters, but ultimately, what was learned in that first-round series was a hard but productive truth to confront for Stone's Rockets. That truth being that you cannot compete for titles in the NBA without a closer. The Rockets may have had a better team than the Warriors in 2025, but they were defeated ultimately because they lacked a closer. That being, someone who can take over NBA playoff games in the waning minutes when the entire opposing defense knows exactly who's getting the ball. Curry's Warriors had won the battle, but because Stone's regime was able to learn exactly what they needed in that offseason, they could later put themselves in position to win the war. Amidst the heartbreak of playoff loss, there was some great news and some not-so-great news on the developmental side for the Houston Rockets. Şengün and Thompson both proved to Stone and the rest of the league that they had a place on the floor in the biggest game of the year for Houston. Facing the mighty Warriors in Game 7, the pair were the only 2 Houston players to eclipse 20 points in the game, adding vital defense, rebounding, and leadership to the flustered young core around them. Thompson's team-high 24 points in particular served as proof that even though Rockets fans had been upset at the 2023 lottery drawing initially, pulling the 4th pick in that draft was a prime example of the Stones' theory that there was was no longer any more doubt as to whether or not Şengün and Thompson would be prioritized as the future of the Rockets organization. The same, however, could not be said for Jalen Green. Green had struggled mightily on both sides of the ball in that series, failing to take advantage of mismatches on offense and to stay in front of people on defense. Green, renowned for his scoring ability, failed to crack double-digit points in 4 of the Rockets' 7 games against Golden State, including Game 7. Green's inability to separate himself as Houston's closer had made him expendable heading into the 2025 offseason, an offseason where the Rockets were rapidly preparing to make the leap from Phase 2 of the process into Phase 3. The team's success in the first 2 seasons of Ime Udoka's Rockets tenure widened the eyes of his bosses in the summer of 2025. Team owner Tillman Fertitta and GM Rafael Stone finally felt confident after a 4-year process that now was the time for the team to prepare for a run of contention. Stone's first move to make that dream a reality following their elimination at the hands of the Warriors was to re-sign impending free agent center Steven Adams to a 3-year, $39 million extension. Adams had proved to be a key cog of the Rockets' rim-protecting efforts during the regular season, and had also revolutionized the Rockets' rebounding percentage during his minutes during the regular and postseason. The second move of the summer for Stone was to pull off a massive blockbuster trade for former league MVP and former 4-time scoring champion Kevin Durant. The same Durant that had played a role in eliminating the Rockets in 2013, 2018, and 2019, and the same Durant that had lured James Harden away from Houston back in 2021. He was now a member of the Rockets himself after pulling off the second successful trade demand of his career. The Rockets needed a closer, and they solved for X pretty much as well as anyone could have hoped, bringing in one of the 10 greatest scoring players in the 75-plus year history of the NBA. The team also brought back former rim-running center Clint Capella from the Atlanta Hawks in the same multi-team deal that brought Durant to Houston. Capella, a mainstay of the late-stage Harden Rockets era, is now expected to provide productive minutes off the bench as part of a suddenly loaded frontcourt that includes Alperen Şengün, Kevin Durant, Steven Adams, and Capella himself. Sadly, though, for Rafael Stone, as part of the compensation for the Kevin Durant trade, the team was forced to part ways with 2 key cogs of the rebuilding process, in Dillon Brooks and the first ever draftee of the Stone era, Jalen Green. The pair's hefty salaries were critical to making the money aspect of the trade work. That being because teams over the first apron of the salary cap are forced to match the salary money coming in and out of all trade deals. Green was a beloved player for many Houstonians, but after his poor performance against the Warriors, the writing had been put on the wall that he would be the most expendable young asset dangled in trade talks at season's end over more valuable young players like Şengün, Thompson, Eason, and Smith Jr. When Durant became available and made it clear that he would not block a trade to the Rockets, that was all she wrote for Green's tenure in Houston. Sentimentality aside, going from Jalen Green to Kevin Durant as your team's closer in a strictly basketball context is a lot like going from Ken Giles to Ryan Presley as your team's closer. There's just no fair way to compare the two. Houston replaced an athletic but streaky scorer with an iffy 3-point ball to literally one of the 10 greatest scorers in NBA history. There remains some skepticism that Durant is a poor fit for the club due to the fact that he is now 37 years old, and for a normal basketball player, that would be quite concerning. But Kevin Durant as a basketball player is anything but normal. While his age has gotten up there, the basketball world has still seen little evidence of any sort of decline. At his last stop with the Phoenix Suns, during his age 34 to 36 seasons, Durant averaged 27 points per game on phenomenal 53, 43, 85% shooting splits from the field, 3-point line, and free throw line, respectively. Durant is also unofficially the only player in NBA history to recover from a full Achilles tear and return to previous form, and he accomplished that as a 32-year-old while playing for Brooklyn in 2021. He, alongside Steph Curry and LeBron James, have rewritten the book on aging gracefully as a basketball player. Father Time may remain undefeated, but Durant, by all accounts, seems able and willing to continue pushing past the 12th round in that fight. Being surrounded by the Terror Twins and Houston's other array of plus defenders should aid in his quest to stay alive as one of the premier scorers in the game today. If he can stay healthy, Houston should finally have a premier closing option again for the next few seasons. The final big move for Stone in the 2025 offseason was to award free agent wing Dorian Finney-Smith to a 4-year, $53 million contract. Finney-Smith, a rangy 6'7" wing, fits the Udoka system perfectly. bringing floor spacing, defensive versatility, and 40 games of playoff experience to the Rockets. With that final addition, the core had been set. Kevin Durant, Alperen Şengün, Amen Thompson, Fred VanVleet, Tari Eason, Steven Adams, Dorian Finney-Smith, Clint Capella, Reed Shepherd, and Jabari Smith Jr. now represent the 10-man core that Fertitta and Stone are entrusting to chase the franchise's first championship since 1995. The Houston Rockets organization has one of the richest histories of any in the NBA. They have had a number of star-studded runs of success, from Moses Malone's squads in the late 70s and early 80s to Hakeem Olajuwon's team of the late 80s and 90s to the James Harden-led 2010s era teams. However, the team has only ever been able to climb the NBA mountaintop and win the NBA Finals during the Olajuwon years, in which they won back-to-back championships in 1994 and 1995. Now, for the first time since the Harden era, the team finds itself in a position with top 5 finals odds in the entire NBA, highlighting the fact that they are, at long last, firmly in Stage 3, competing for titles. While the heartbreaking news that Fred VanVleet tore his ACL during a September workout certainly has thrown a healthy amount of water on the hype train surrounding Toyota Center as we head towards the 2025-2026 season, due to the team's uncanny size and depth, it is hard to see a world where the Rockets are not again one of the top powers in the Western Conference. Their size and defensive versatility has garnered a lot of comparisons to the 2016 Oklahoma City Thunder in more ways than one. With a little help from the player empowerment era, Ime Udoka's leadership, lottery luck, and a lesson-learning 5th date with Steph Curry, the Rockets fans have found themselves once again preparing for a string of deep runs in the NBA playoffs. Rockets fans know as well as any that hype and expectations can be pretty meaningless in the long haul. Keep in mind that this is the same fan base that watched the 1986 squad melt down due to injury and substance abuse issues, saw Yao Ming's body break down on him, and sat in horror as the Harden-era Rockets suffered Sisyphean levels of suffering throughout the 2010s. But considering the depth of this new core, their incredible defensive acumen, and brimming youth supplementing the aging Durant, most Houstonians have to concede that the future is as bright as ever. For the fans' sake, we can only hope that Alperen Şengün and Amen Thompson are able to lead the franchise where it hasn't been since Hakeem Olajuwon and Clyde Drexler were leading the way for Clutch City.